From the dawn of time when our ancestors first learned to fashion crude weapons for hunting, to the technologically advanced battlefields of today, humanity has been haunted and defined by war. In this series, we're going to look at the largest armies ever assembled, the historical equivalent of a hurricane or an earthquake, only these are forces of nature made entirely of people. Entire civilizations were built by them, destroyed by them, and often defined by them. Buckle up, because the stories of these military behemoths are full of twists and turns that would be unbelievable if they weren't etched in the stone of history. Kicking off our list at number 10, we have the army that dominated the Eastern Mediterranean for centuries, the Ottoman war machine. At its peak in the 16th century, this was a force to be reckoned with. Imagine, if you will, over 1 million men under arms, janissaries, those elite soldiers ripped from their families as children and forged into living weapons, cavalry riding down on you like a storm from the steppes of Asia, and a navy that challenged even the mighty Venetians for control of the Mediterranean. This was a military that seemed unstoppable. For centuries, the very mention of the Ottoman army sent shivers down the spines of kings and emperors from Vienna to Persia. They weren't just conquerors, they were a force of nature that reshaped the political and cultural landscape of 3 continents. Coming in at number 9, we journey back to the world of antiquity, to an empire whose legend looms large in the history books, Rome. At its peak, around the 2nd century AD, the Roman army, those legendary legions, comprised over 450,000 soldiers. These weren't just farmers with swords, these were highly trained, disciplined professionals, capable of marching over 20 miles a day while carrying 60 pounds of gear. For centuries, they were the most effective fighting force on the planet, crushing rebellions, conquering new territory, and building an empire that stretched from the British Isles to the deserts of the Middle East. Their discipline, their organization, their sheer bloody-mindedness, it's the stuff of legend. And it's not hard to see why. This was a military machine built not just for conquest, but for endurance, for holding on to their hard-won gains for centuries. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you encounter a military giant forged in the fires of ideology and total war, the Soviet Union's Red Army. During World War II, this behemoth swelled to a mind-boggling 11 million soldiers. This was a nation fighting for its very survival against the Nazi war machine, and the sacrifices made, the sheer scale of human suffering and loss on the Eastern Front, are almost impossible to comprehend. But from the ashes of that conflict, the Red Army emerged as one of the most powerful military forces the world had ever seen. At number 7, we encounter an army that swept out of the steppes of Asia like a storm, leaving a trail of conquered empires in its wake, the Mongols. Led by one of history's most brilliant and ruthless military commanders, Genghis Khan, the Mongol army at its peak numbered over 100,000 warriors. These weren't just warriors, they were horsemen since childhood, able to fire arrows with deadly accuracy from horseback. They were masters of logistics, masters of psychological warfare, masters of adapting to their enemies' tactics. The Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire in history, wasn't built on brute strength alone. It was built on speed, on maneuverability, on the terror they inspired in their enemies. Our journey takes us next to the heart of ancient China, to the Han Dynasty, a period of immense cultural and military achievement. With a population exceeding 60 million, the Han Dynasty could field armies that dwarfed those of their enemies. We're talking hundreds of thousands of soldiers equipped with advanced weaponry like the crossbow and iron swords, fighting to defend their borders against nomadic tribes and expand their influence across East Asia. This was a dynasty that understood the importance of centralized power, of bureaucracy, of logistics, all working in concert to maintain their vast armies. They were the guardians of the Silk Road, the defenders of Chinese civilization, and their legacy is still felt today. Our list wouldn't be complete without a nod to the empire upon which the sun never set, the British Empire. At its zenith in the 19th century, the British Army stood as a global superpower, boasting over 2 million soldiers stationed across the globe. This was a force forged in countless colonial wars, equipped with the most advanced weaponry of the age, and led by officers who believed in their imperial mission with an almost religious zeal. From the plains of India to the battlefields of Europe, the British Army cast a long shadow. It was the enforcer of a global empire, a symbol of both British power and the brutality of colonialism. At number 4 we come to a modern superpower, a nation that emerged from the 20th century as the world's sole remaining superpower, the United States. With the largest defense budget on the planet, the U.S. Armed Forces, with over 1.3 million active-duty personnel, maintains a presence on land, sea, and air that is unrivaled. From the deserts of the Middle East to the skies above Eastern Europe, the reach of the American military is undeniable. This is a military force shaped by the Cold War, by the War on Terror, by the constant need to be ready for any threat, anywhere in the world. It's a military that reflects America's own complex history on the world stage, a history full of triumphs and tragedies, of interventions and withdrawals. Number 3 takes us back to Napoleonic France, a time when one man's ambition plunged Europe into a generation of war. Napoleon Bonaparte, a master strategist and tactician, commanded the loyalty of his soldiers like few leaders in history. At its peak, his Grande Armee numbered over 1 million soldiers, a force that seemed invincible for a time. From the pyramids of Egypt to the frozen wastelands of Russia, Napoleon's armies marched and fought with an almost superhuman endurance. They were driven by a belief in their emperor, by the revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, fraternity, and by the promise of glory and plunder. Coming in at number 2, we have the Russian Empire, a nation with a long and bloody history of warfare. With vast territories and a massive population, it's no surprise that Russia has fielded some of the largest armies in history. During World War I, the Russian army reached its peak size, with over 5 million soldiers mobilized for the conflict. This was a nation fighting on multiple fronts, against Germany and Austria-Hungary in the west, against the Ottoman Empire in the south, and against internal enemies within its own borders. The Russian experience in World War I is a story of incredible hardship, of courage and sacrifice on a massive scale, but also of incompetence, of political instability, and ultimately of revolution. And finally, at the top of our list, we have the undisputed champion of military might, at least in terms of sheer numbers, the Chinese Empire. Throughout its long and storied history, China has fielded some of the largest armies the world has ever seen. We're talking millions of soldiers serving under dynasties like the Qin, the Han, the Tang, the Ming, and the Qing. From the Great Wall built to hold back invaders to the voyages of Zheng He's treasure fleet, the Chinese military has left an indelible mark on history. This is a story that spans millennia, a story of emperors and generals, of innovations in warfare, of the rise and fall of dynasties. It's a story that underscores the sheer scale of Chinese civilization, a civilization that has repeatedly produced armies that dwarfed those of its rivals. These 10 armies, these colossal forces of history, they weren't just numbers on a battlefield. They were made up of individuals, each with their own story, their own reasons for fighting, their own hopes and dreams. And their actions, their sacrifices, their victories and defeats have shaped the world we live in today. So the next time you're reading about a war, or watching a documentary, or even just looking at a map, take a moment to think about the human beings who fought and died on those battlefields, who built those empires, who shaped the course of history. Because their stories, often lost to the mists of time, are just as important as the grand narratives of empires and ideologies. Closing music fades in, montage of historical battles and military formations. These 10 armies have left an indelible mark on history, shaping the destiny of nations and empires through their size, strength, and strategic prowess. Join us next time for more fascinating insights into the history of warfare.